Okay, that's good. This is a song from the Povo Arara, which is in central Amazon. And this song here, which you're listening to, is the song they sing in order to gather people for a party. So just while we're gathering, let's have a quick listen to this. The music I'm going to be playing today, and a little bit of the music I'm going to be singing today, is all sacred music. It's all sacred music, and normally it's not sung out of ceremony, and I'm not going to sing entire songs, and there's certain songs I'm not going to sing, but I would like to ask you, very respectfully, to listen carefully to all the music that's sung. And that's all. There's not going to be very much of it. Right. From the lips of spirits, music and poetry in Santo Daime tradition. First question is, what is Santo Daime? I'm going to tell you very quickly. Santo Daime is a syncretic tradition that grew up in the Brazilian Amazon. Its roots are indigenous Amazonian shamanism and also folk Catholicism, which is somewhat different to what you might understand by Catholicism. That's all I'm going to say about Daime. Really, that's what our ritual looks like. We have the women on one side, the men on the other. That's our feitio, where we make our ayahuasca. We call it Daime. This is how we serve our brew. And this is a little initiation ceremony. This is a wedding. This is a family affair, is Daime. And this is the music. And music is absolutely central to our tradition. In fact, it's pretty much all we do in some of our rituals. We begin with a short prayer, and then we'll sing perhaps 132 songs, or 150 songs, or however many it might be. We can sing sometimes for 12 hours, 15 hours even. And it's pretty much straight, or might be a break in the middle. So music is absolutely central to our tradition. And the music, or rather the songs or the hymns, they carry instructions for us about how to live our lives, how to be good people, not to tell lies or not to gossip and these kind of things. And they also bring in the force of ayahuasca. So where does our music come from? This gentleman is Raimundo Irineu Serra, Mestre Irineu, who went from Maranhão, in this part of Brazil, over to the west side of Brazil, to the Amazon, and there he met people who were very much shorter than him. You can see how tall he is, and some of those people were the Hunikuin Indians. And this is what they look like, and we think that it was Hunikuin who he drank with. His Hunikuin are also known as Kashinawa. And so he first started drinking ayahuasca with them. And I'm going to just introduce you very quickly to what an Icaro sounds like. This is not an Icaro from the Hunikuin people. Just have a quick listen. So the first thing you'll notice is that there isn't actually any words. It's whistling. And when the words kick in a minute, you'll notice that it's a lot of repetitive syllables. And it appears that the important thing is carried on the melody and the cadence. He's going to start singing in a second. So you'll notice that it's very repetitive and a very specific signature of the music. Now, the Icaros are understood to contain the essence, or to carry the essences of certain plants, also certain animals, or certain natural forces. And they're understood to be received directly from the plant, from the madre of the plant, the spirit mother of the plant. And when a shaman sings the Icaro, he's passing over the essence of that Icaro into either a patient or into an object as well. And Susana Bustos did some fantastic research on this and found out something rather interesting. She was looking at participants in a shamanic ceremony, traditional ceremony, and afterwards she interviewed the participants, and she said, or the participants said rather, that certain Icaros had produced certain healings, certain cathartic healing experiences. And as they'd been listening to the Icaro, then this a series of visions had unfolded with the music. And that's quite interesting in itself, and I'm sure many of us have had experiences with psychedelics which heighten musical appreciation and all that, but there's something a little bit beyond that, which is that when she interviewed the people, they responded particularly to a certain Icaro. Each person responded particularly to a certain Icaro, and there are many Icaros sung. And she didn't tell the shaman which one it was, but the shaman knew which one that they had had their specific healing with. And he also, in his own interviews, talked about whatever it was that was lacking, whatever was the problem that Icaro was sent to deal with, which tallied with both the visions that they had seen and the reports that they gave. Because ayahuasca healing tends to be a more holistic affair, as I'm sure you're aware, and often it's some kind of a trauma or something that's happened which is understood to precipitate whatever illness it is. So these, as I said, are received in dreams and visions and dieta. Now, do we have anything like this in our own tradition? We have to go quite a long way back. We have to go all the way back to Paracelsus in the 16th century, and he was a very interesting chap. And he cured differently to the prevalent medical model at the time. At the time, it was thought that disease was an imbalance. So if you had too much blood, for example, that made you hot, you would let the blood and might bleed someone until they were unconscious. And Paracelsus said that's not true. He said that a disease has a specific signature, and you can look for that signature in nature somewhere, and then you can contact that signature, and you can, through alchemical processes, you can take off that volatile, that spirit, in fact. Where we get the word spirits from in chemistry is from the idea of this part of the mineral or the plant that you can put into a flask, and that's what he's doing there. So we're talking about spirits. I'm particularly interested today to talk about inspiration, and the clue is in the name, inspirare. It means to breathe into, and what we're talking about there is a spirit breathing some information into whoever's hearing it, the medium in this case. And Paracelsus was a fantastic healer. He cured, according to town records, over half the lepers in Nuremberg, in the colony outside Nuremberg, and then he got kicked out of Nuremberg for causing all kinds of trouble. Now, he said something very interesting about it wasn't him, a contemporary of his saw him writing one day and was quite shocked by the way he wrote. And this is how he wrote. He said he writes, until with boots and spurs and fully dressed, he throws himself into bed and rests merely for 3 hours or so and then writes on again. So we're talking about quite a possessed and frenetic writing, and this is going to make some sense as we talk a little bit more. So back to the jungle, there's Mr. Ioneo. He learnt something with the Indians he drank with, and he became a curandero himself, and he was working with whistling and humming, and didn't have any songs, but he had a contact with the Queen of the Forest, this entity called the Queen of the Forest. And one day, he had the following conversation with her. It went like this, and I will translate it for you. She said to him, listen, or look, I'm going to give you some hymns, and you're going to leave behind this business of singing, of humming and whistling. And she said, don't do this, my lady. I don't know how to sing. And she said, well, I'll teach you. And the following day, he was looking at the moon, and she said, now you're going to sing. And he said, but how am I going to sing? It's very difficult. And she said, you're going to learn, I'm going to teach you, open your mouth. And he said, but how? And she said, open your mouth, now estou mandando, which means, that's what Brazilian mums say to their children. Is it not me who's ordering you? And so he opened his mouth, and as he was looking at the moon, and this was the song that came through, and I'm going to sing just a little first bit of it, and it goes like this. Deus te salve, ó lua branca, da luz tão prateada, tu sois minha protetora, de Deus tu sois estimada. And it goes on for quite a long time. In fact, And this all came at once as he was looking at the moon, according to our legends. And I'm going to make a little caveat here. Our histories are legends, and legends are often history. So let's go on. And as he understood it, or this is the points I want to take out of that story, it was received against his will from a higher power and in its entirety. Now let's look at Nietzsche and his process of writing, if you like. And I've chosen Nietzsche because no one can deny the effect that this man has had on contemporary philosophy and society. And also because when he wrote his masterpiece, Thus Spake Zarathustra, he wrote the first part in about 10 days when he was feverish in bed in his worst winter ever. And he said this: "One is the mere incarnation, mouthpiece, or medium of an almighty moustache. Sorry, of an almighty power. I have never had any choice in the matter." And he went on to say, he talked about revelation in the sense that something becomes suddenly visible and audible with indescribable certainty and accuracy. We're going to come back to Nietzsche in a second, but let's have a quick look at Blake, who was a visionary artist and poet, and he talked about writing from immediate dictation, 12 or sometimes 20 or 30 lines at a time, without premeditation and even against my will. So similar themes there. Of course, he was an artist as well, and this is his art, which, if you compare it to Pablo Amaringo's shamanic vision art, you can see some extremely similar motifs there. The flames entities around the top and these naked ladies here. Nietzsche, coming back to Nietzsche, Nietzsche also talked about very distinct consciousness of an endless number of fine thrills and quiverings to the very toes. We have a word for this in Portuguese. It's called califrios, and it means when a spirit comes close. It's the shivering that overtakes you. And there is an instinct for rhythmic relations. Everything seems to present itself as the readiest, correctest, and the simplest means of expression. So we're talking here about a complete work arriving very quickly. And Mozart said something very similar. Nor do I hear in my imagination the parts successively, but all at once in a pleasing, lively dream. So my metaphor there is an egg being produced, or a complete thing coming out of the womb. And it's not a process of production, like you might build a house, stick the bricks down and the plumbing in and then the paint and blah, 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 blah. It's a different process. So let's have a look at this process. What's going on with the hinos? How does it happen? Well, it seems to happen all at once. I did a series of interviews with Daimistas in Brazil when I was last there at Christmas, and many of them said that it comes all at once, or sometimes not. What often happens is the melody will be heard, either in we'll talk about what situations, but the melody will be heard and then the first lines will come, and as they start to sing, the rest of it will arrive in rapid succession. When does it happen? So it seems to happen in hypnagogic trances, so at this kind of edge between being asleep or awake, and that has some similarities with the ayahuasca state, according to neuro stuff, which I'm not going to go into. So here's a story from a guy I interviewed, and he was talking about how he was after a Daime session, and he was watching the moon, and he was very high, and the following thing happened. So having a vision with the moon very strong, and I heard a voice coming, the moon came down to me and I heard a voice in my ear. So he's talking about the process of receiving the song, and he started weeping. And this is actually something that Nietzsche says as well. Sometimes the nervous tension is relaxed by a flood of tears. He started weeping, something you don't often see in Brazil, men weeping. And the guy next to him was weeping as well. And he said, they had a conversation. It turns out that the guy next to him had also seen the moon coming down to him. So the two of them had the same vision and wept. There we are, weeping. Next, so when else does it happen? It happens in dreams. Often it happens in dreams. You hear of people receiving things in dreams. And actually this happened to me. I was very sick in Brazil, and I did a cura which involved drinking Daime at 4 o'clock in the morning every day for a long time, 5-6 months. And one of the first days I did this, I had a dream where I was in my Daime uniform, and I can remember a whole load of things, but I can remember even the music stand. And I heard a song being played, being sung, a fantastically beautiful song. And when I woke up, I'd forgotten it. couldn't remember it. And I mentioned it to the padrino who was conducting me through this cura, and he said, well, you have to sing it, start singing it in your dream, and then wake up singing. So what else? What do we know about dreams from other areas? Tartini, who had a dream about the devil playing the fiddle to him and played Trillo del Diavolo, which is a famous classical piece. Coleridge's Kubla Khan. This is quite interesting because it was both an opium state and a kind of dream, and its subtitles A Vision in a Dream. And he talks about writing without any sensation or consciousness of effort. And this is some of the most celebrated lines in the English language. And finally, Ramanujan, who was an Indian mathematician. I'm not going to go into him too closely, but I want to get across the point that it's not just poetry that seems to come through these states. It's all kinds of extraordinary things. And this chap, what he got out of his hypnagogic states were equations. And these equations are currently being used in string theory, for example. They've opened up whole new branches of maths. And he said something, a very beautiful quote, which is, "An equation for me has no meaning unless it represents a thought of God." So we're talking about inspiration and how the spirits breathe into us, or if they breathe into us. A fever, this isn't very common in Daime, although it's quite common in other areas. Nietzsche, for example, as I said. One feverish Daimista was Donna Percilia, who was one of Mestri's first followers. And she recounts this story. Someone asked her, "Did you receive this hymn inside the Miração, inside the visionary state?" She said, "Yes, it was inside the Miração. I had such a fever in that day." "And was it an entity saying that to you?" "I listened to it, but I didn't see. I listened to the music, and when I realized, I was already singing it." So again, we're talking about involuntary, almost involuntary creation. So in visions, so we have one particularly lovely story, I think, about Mestre René, who was walking and he saw two entities, and one of them said to the other, "Cacheado, vem cá," which means curly, come here. And the other one laughed, and when you laugh in Portuguese you say "ka ha ka ka ka." And then he said it again, "Cacheado, vem cá," and he laughed again, "ka ha ka ka." And then the two of them laughed. He goes like this: "Cacheado, vem cá, ka ha ka 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 ka. Cacheado, vem cá, ka ha ka ka ha ka ka. Ka ha ka ka ha ka ka, ka ha ka 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 ha ka. Ka ha ka ka ha ka ka, ka ha ka ka ha ka ka." So that's one of our tunes. And also in vision, so that's the vision slide. How am I doing for time?
Got a little more than 10 minutes.
Okay. Spontaneous reception of hymns. This doesn't happen quite so often. You do hear people talking about when they were driving along and they started receiving a hymn. Not quite so common in Daime. But what is quite common is natural events precipitating this creative state. And obviously in the rainforest it rains a lot, and a friend of mine, Edson Alexandre, who has an extraordinarily beautiful series of hymns, he was round at a friend's house having lunch, and it started to rain. And rain in Portuguese goes chué, chué, chua. That's the noise of it. And so as it started to rain, he started to hear this song. And it's a long song, it all came at once, and it looks like this. And it sounds... Eee. Oh no, I didn't want to do that. Sounds like this. Shue, 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 shua, shua, shua. Shue, 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 shua, shua, shua. Relampejou e trovejou e desceu água para limpar. Relampejou e trovejou e desceu água para limpar. Which means it rained, it rained, it rained, it rained, it rained, it rained. It thunder and lightning and water came out of the sky to clean everything. It's a long hymn, as you saw in that last slide. We also have calls, along with the shamanic tradition. We have the calling of spirits. And I'm not going to sing them because I don't want to call any spirits here right now. But we have something quite similar, which is, we have the kind of, you have the calls to specific entities, the names I won't mention, but you also have the calls to the Divine Father, and there's a really beautiful one which goes like this, and it's different to the shamanic tradition in that there's often the hymn will begin with a call and continue with the answer. There's one that goes like this. It goes, chamei lá nas alturas que o divino me ouvi, o minha mãe me respondeu, o filho meu estou aqui, which means I called to the heights for the divine to hear me. My mother responded, my son, I'm here. So that's the call and response. And then we also have something which I think is quite specific to, seems like quite specific to Daime, which is the problem and solution. My missus had one of these, in fact. She was out shopping with our kids, and her daughter, my daughter in fact, picked up some chocolate and put it in the bottom of the pushchair so she wouldn't see it, and she came home and then she realised that we had a little shoplifter. And so she said, she thought to herself, oh no, it's just a massive corporation, I don't need to do anything about it. And then she said, no, she's quite very moral, my missus. And so she went back off to Waitrose or wherever it was and gave it back and then came home. And as she opened the door to come home, this hymn started coming into her head. And I arrived shortly afterwards, actually. And I said, what's the door doing open? And I realised what she was doing, and I kind of left her to it, because I've seen her in that state before. And it goes, the hymn, just I'm going to sing the first part of it, it goes like this. É pra ter consciência, seguindo o caminho, anda direitinho, dentro do poder divino. And it goes on and on and on. And that means it's for us to be conscious, following the path, walking correctly within the divine power. So these kind of moral things seem to come up. And here's a really interesting one from Mestre Uneu as well. This was a chap called Antonia Gomez, one of his friends and followers, and he was very close to dying. He was ill, and he said to Mestre Uneu, I'm feeling awful, and I'm scared of dying. And Mestre went away, drank some Daime, and came back to him some days later with this song. That's the Portuguese, and that's the English. Maybe you can just read the English to get an idea of the kind of things we sing about. And I'm going to sing the first bit in Portuguese for you whilst you're doing that. By the way, when it says on the bar, it's talking about the harbour. It's not talking about the pub, this kind of liminal zone at the edge of the sea. Sou eu cantei na barra que fiz estremecer. Se tu queres vida eu te dou, que ninguém não quer morrer. And they're always call and repeat, so we would repeat it again. So eu cantei na barra, and so on and so forth. Right, so there's these moral questions, and are they moral? Or are they poetic? So this is really what I really want to have us think about here. Is this the spirits? How are they working exactly? And what is this? What's going on really? How do they come so quickly? And I don't really have answers to that question. And also, what about this transpersonal aspect of it? Can a spirit appear to one person, another person at the same time? Confusing area. Now, what I understand that science can explain many things, and there's certain things which science hasn't yet explained and may never explain. Poetry can explain everything. There is nothing, as I understand it, which doesn't submit to poetic understanding. And listening to the mathematical talk yesterday, who was seeing these patterns, even in the sequence of prime numbers, you see repeating patterns in nature all over, and I think there's something in the essences and the signatures of plants and also of situations which have a kind of internal poetry. And in fact, it's a radical proposition, but I think the universe is run on a poetic mainframe. And so what's that got to do with this? Right, we know from thank you. So we know from other receptive states outside of Daime that these things can have great impact on the world. This is Mark Pesce, for example, who says, he's the guy who invented the protocols of cyberspace. He talks about this most striking example of this psychedelic catalysis is all the cyberspace protocols. I mean, wham, it came to me like that, and I just saw them. And this apocalypse or this revelation changed our world forever, really. So we know that outside of Daime, you can, oh, this is another thing Mark Pesky said, which is very beautiful. He says, "My bliss was revealed through the psychedelic experience. If psychedelics reveal the divine or allow you to eminentize it, to see it physically or this sort of thing, wouldn't it make sense for that moment to be synonymous with the moment of revealing what your bliss is?" So something to ponder there. This is a whole bunch of people who've received things in this hypnagogic state or in dreams or in whatever. The Tesla coil, the AC motor, Boolean algebra, which runs your computers, Kekule's structural theory, benzene ring, all these various inspirations. I could go on, but I really want to bring it back to the Daime experience, and hymns are not the only things that we receive in insights. There's all kinds of other things, inspirations and ideas. But I want to talk very briefly about my own situation and how it impacted on my life. I got very sick, as I was saying, in the jungle, and it was at a time when I was writing a book, and and the book was about, among other things, pharmaceuticals and magic and will, and I got Leishmaniasis, which is a hideous disease and potentially disfiguring. It can dissolve the cartilage in your nose and ears, and that's a picture of it. It comes as an ulcer. I got bitten by a sandfly, and it didn't make. I mean, it would have made scientific sense, I guess, to treat this with injections. In fact, my sister's a tropical medicine specialist and really insisted that I do this, and it wouldn't have made poetic sense to me. And I was living in a poetic universe at the time, and I like to think I still am. And so I decided to treat it with ayahuasca, with Daime. And this is very simply because our hymns tell me to. And the hymns in other areas had given me fantastic gifts over and over and over again. I was in no doubt of the magic and poetry of my tradition. And so here's one, curo tudo, expulso tudo com poder de Pai Eterno, which means I cure everything, I expel everything with the power of the Divine Father. And that's something, don't have fear to die. If you run away, it's going to get worse for you. It's another one of our hymns. So I decided to treat it, and the long and the short of this story is it very radically altered the direction of my life. I ended up married to this lady here, and who I met during this cura, and who ended up kind of nursing me back to health. And I had these two kids, right? And aren't they lovely? Now, look very carefully at Sophia's, here. This is Sophia, and she has a birthmark here. And there you can see it a bit closer. And there you can see my wound. And there you can see Janaina, who's my other daughter. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a birthmark there. They were both born with birthmarks in the spot where my own wound was left, which makes fantastic poetic sense to me. So I was very excited about this. I mentioned this to my padrino when I went to go and see him a couple of years later, and he said, "Oh, I left a tag." And he was really, it was just totally normal thing in Brazil, and in that matrix, magic is just, and poetry is just, it's just totally fundamental. It's a world we can live in. And that's basically it. It only remains for me to plug my website, and which has lots of stories and interesting stuff on it, and a book which is going to be coming out next year. And the subtitle of that is The History, Psychology and Poetry of the Apocalypse. Thank you very much.